Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Lake City Knitting. My name is Molly, and this is actually my second attempt at recording the podcast this week. I got all the way done with the first go-round, and then I realized that I had completely forgotten one of my topics. So I decided, well, I've got the time, and I'll record. So, first off, just a note on these, I'm going to try and keep them in the 20 to 30 minute range for the episodes. I feel like that's about as much talking as I can really do and stay at all interesting. I don't know if these are interesting to begin with, but for any chance at all that they're interesting, I don't want to go too much over 30 minutes. So, first off, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who contacted me about last week's episode and gave me nice comments and feedback, and I really, really, really appreciate everyone who watched. It meant a lot to me. And thank you for coming back, and if you're new, thank you for joining me this week. So, as far as what I'm wearing this week, this is the Omegong pattern by Thea Coleman, who is Baby Cocktails. This is the second sweater pattern of hers that I've made, and they both happen to be in red, which is a little bit of a coincidence, so maybe I'll make the next one in red too and continue the theme. The yarn that I used for it is Joe Sharp Silk Road Aran Tweed in Posy, and I had quite an adventure with the yarn for this because I had 12 balls that I had bought 10 years ago. It was one of my first major yarn purchases when I kind of got turned on to decent wool, and I bought it off eBay, I believe, for $5 a skein or whatever, and it was a really good deal. I was super excited about it. It marinated in my stash for years and years and years, and then I decided I was going to make something, and I tried a couple different patterns. I got almost halfway through 2 different sweater patterns and a skirt pattern, so this is the 4th attempt at knitting this stuff up. Finally it took. Finally it happened. I ended up with a finished object. This took just over 13 skeins, so I actually had to buy some off of someone on Rav who had it in her D-stash page. And of course, being that I bought the first 12 skeins 10 years ago, I knew there was no hope of matching dye lots, so I alternated skeins starting from about here up. Luckily, you can't really tell. Even in bright light, I couldn't tell unless I really knew what I was looking for. Then I could kind of almost see it, but it was a really, really happy turn of events, because if I had had to rip this out for a 4th time and start completely from scratch again, this yarn would have been in the trash. But instead, it's not. It had a happy ending. It's a beautiful sweater that I love a lot. So I started this sweater on December 29th, and I finished it a couple days before I left for Madrona, so probably around February 9th or so, and that includes about a 10-day period where I had to wait for the extra yarn to get here. So it was a pretty quick knit for me. I wish I had made it just a little bit longer. If I'd known that I was going to have extra, I would have put on another inch or 2, but I haven't blocked it yet, so it's extremely possible that once I block it, it'll come out to, the kind of tunic length that I'm looking for. I'm tall and I have a long torso, so I always have to add length to sweaters, and it is what it is. So I'm hoping that if I can get another inch, I think it'll be absolutely perfect. So, and I know it's terrible knitting practice to wear something, especially, wear something when people are going to be looking at it when I haven't even blocked it, but oh well, I never claimed to be, an extremely conscientious knitter. So, and I'm also a terrible podcaster because this is coffee. I'm a terrible podcaster. I don't have a cat, and I don't drink a lot of tea. So, that puts me in the lower 10% right there. So, let's move on. So, finished objects. I did finish the hat that I was working on last week. It's adorable. It came out just about the right size for my daughter, who has kind of a biggish head for an 8-year-old, so it would probably fit a smallish headed adult. And I finished the cable down the side stockinette vanilla socks. I'm super excited about them. They came out beautifully. I can't wait to wear them. I have even woven in the ends, which almost never happens. I have many pairs of socks that still have the ends kind of floating around in the toe, because when I'm making them for myself, I get done with them and I just want to put them on my feet immediately. So this time I managed to restrain those urges and I actually wove in the ends. So I have a completed 100% finished object. So, on to works in progress. Now, the main thrust of this podcast, the capelet. As you can see, I have wound the yarn. It was quite an experience. It took not as long as I'd feared, but it was every bit as much of a pain in the butt as I had feared. But it's done. So, I feel like I can move this project from the realm of plots and plans and kind of, nebulous, not really existing, out there in the ether ideas into an actual work in progress, because I've woven in the ends, which means that I will cast on. As for why I haven't cast on, it's because I can't find my needle threader. I tore the house apart looking for it Friday and Saturday, couldn't find it anywhere. Decided that I'll just spend the $2 and go buy another pack of 3. It drives me crazy though, because I know it's here somewhere, and this just goes to show why you should never put anything away. Because I had it, and I had it recently. I had it 2 weeks ago when I was finishing up the beading on another project. And somehow I thought to myself, I'll put this somewhere safe where I'll know where it is so I can have it in the future, and I can't remember what that place is. So that's just great. And I haven't had the time to get over to the side of town where I can buy, where the Joann's is, where I can buy another needle threader yet. Probably that'll be tomorrow. So next week I should have some actual progress, and it's really exciting. So other than that, works in progress, what I've spent most of my knitting time on this week is these fantastic mittens. I'm so in love with them. I'm super, super excited. This is the Gudrun pattern. I can't remember the designer's name, but I will link it in the show notes. I'm super excited about these. The yarn is, the black is Nature Spun Sport Weight, and the multicolored is Mini Mochi, of course. I don't know why Mini Mochi does the color repeats the way they do, where they have it go from red to orange to yellow, stay yellow for forever, and then go back to orange to red, and so on. And they do it with green too. I don't know why that is. It doesn't really fit with, being a true rainbow, but I can overlook it. I was really excited with these guys because I got the colors to line up, so it actually does look like a real rainbow, and that was not intentional. That was kind of at first a happy accident, and then I realized when I was up to about here on this first mitten that I could probably get the second mitten's colors to coordinate nicely, and I did. So I'm really excited about it. All they need is thumbs and the ends woven in and a good blocking, and they'll be done. So next week they should be moved into the finished object realm from the works in progress. These are going to be donated. This is part of a really exciting project. A friend of mine started a group on Facebook called Feminine Sees a Symbol, and where the idea is that you knit or crochet or craft in general items for women that are really inspiring and that are working for women's rights in whatever kind of capacity that you personally feel stirred by. And there's a lot of people that are knitting for famous people. People are making things for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and for Stephanie Toti and various others. I'm not really super into the idea of knitting for a famous person, or even just like I don't know. I don't really feel like, I feel like it's kind of, to me, it wouldn't suit. So I at first wasn't going to make anything, and then someone suggested that we make things for clinic escorts, because she's a clinic escort in North Dakota. So it's, she can always use winter accessories when she's out there, helping people get from their cars into clinics and get through the protesters and everything. So I thought that would be perfect. So these are going to get thumbs on them and get mailed off to be donated to some clinic escort with cold hands. So I'm very, very, very excited with how these came out. I could not be happier with them. The pattern was fantastic. I didn't do the cuffs the way the pattern called for. I did my standard mitten cuff, which is just a couple inches of corrugated ribbing. I always feel that looks the best for stranded color work because it flows nicely into the rest of the pattern. It's such a pain to do though, so I realize why people don't want to do corrugated ribbing, because it is a huge the corrugated ribbing probably was the most difficult and time-consuming part of these mittens. Everything else was total potato chip knitting. I just sat and was furiously working on them because it was so fun. The corrugated ribbing, not fun. So that's my only work in progress this week, aside from the capelet, which again, I'm considering a work in progress because, baby steps. For plots and plans, I'm going to be casting on another pair of socks in this really interesting colorway. It's Barocco Socks is the yarn, so it's kind of your standard sock yarn. It's a 75-25 wool and nylon blend. It'll wear like iron. The color's kind of interesting, I think is the best word for it. I don't even know what to say. It'll be really fun to see how these knit up. So that's what I'm going to be casting on for later today, and hopefully next week I'll have at least one sock done so you can see what I have wrought, right? Other plots and plans, I've seen some really cool patterns on Ravelry lately. There's a lace weight shawl pattern that came to my attention recently called The Miller's Daughter by Melissa Berg, and I will link to that in the show notes. The thing that I liked about it, it's a very graceful lace weight shawl, and it's 2 colors. So immediately my brain went to, I'm going to have some of this left over. I will definitely be using this as one of the 2 colors, and then I have a couple choices for the second color. But again, that's really far down the road because, it's very optimistic of me to be looking at this yarn and thinking, oh, once I'm done with my main project, I'll have leftovers. Yeah, we'll see. Other than that, there's a really cool kind of scarf pattern thing called Jewel Dragon that I saw recently, and it looks kind of like if swing knitting and I-cord and entrelac all got together and had a baby. I haven't bought the pattern yet, so I don't know exactly how the technique is done, but it's really cool, and there are some really striking finished objects on Rav, so I'll link to that in the show notes as well. No sweater patterns on the horizon, except for Milk Stout, which again I'm still eyeing. That's another Thea Coleman pattern. I don't have any red sweater yarn, so maybe I should get some for that, just to continue the baby cocktails in red theme. So I think that's enough for plots and plans. The needle discussion from last week, I'd asked about needles for people with metal sensitivities, and I had some really good suggestions. The first one that I got almost immediately, and I was kicking myself for not thinking of this myself last week, is Crystal Palace bamboo. And I don't know why I blanked on that, because the only double pointed needles that I use are Crystal Palace, but it's pretty rare for me to use DPNs. I almost always do Magic Loop or 2 Circs, but I still should have remembered. They do have a nice point. They're not quite as pointy as ChiaoGoo or even, Knit Picks or anything like that, but they're a nice option if you want to, if the Takumi clovers are just not cutting it for you. The other suggestion that I had, and this would be more for people who have a mild sensitivity to metal, would be the Knitter's Pride carbons. They do have metal at the tips, so that might not be a great option if you're super sensitive, because you still will be coming in contact with metal a bit. But the main part of the needle is carbon fiber, so that if you just have a little bit of sensitivity, if you just get a slight tingle, that might be a good option. And then I had an anti-recommendation, which and this is kind of off the bamboo needle subject, but I had an anti-recommendation for Addi Lace Clicks. Someone said that they had tried them at their local yarn store, fallen in love, laid out the fairly serious chunk of change in order to bring them home, and now that they're home they have buyer's remorse, and every time they use these needles they like them less. Apparently there's not anything specific to point to about why they don't like them. It's just kind of, like I said, buyer's remorse. So that sucks, and I'm sorry, and I hope that you come back around to the Addi Lace Clicks. I hope that they, it's just some kind of funk and you can work through it, because that would really be a shame to have those and hate using them just because they're so useful, Wow. So, onward. So I've been watching a lot of podcasts recently, and I've noticed that a lot of people are doing knitting journals, and I decided that I would do a knitting journal. I just thought, what a good idea. Now, my knitting journal is not as fancy as a lot of people's. I did not go on Etsy and order any, fancy, bespoke, beautiful, patterned journal. This is, a standard, this is a notebook from the school supply section at Target, and it was actually on clearance, so I got it for 50% off. And I had taken my daughter out to, she always needs more notebooks. She writes stories and she always needs more, so I had taken her out. We'd gotten 3 or 4 of these and got home, and I thought, that would make it a good knitting journal, so I stole it from her. So I was kind of, at first when I heard about people doing knitting journals, I thought, well, that's silly because there's Ravelry. Why would you need a knitting journal if you have Rav? And then I realized how many of my projects are not on Rav and will never be on Rav. Usually because I can't be bothered to put them in. It's not like it's a time-consuming issue. It's just that I don't want to put them in until I have pictures. And so things that I don't really feel like taking pictures of, like socks, I knit a million pairs of socks. They're all the same. Why would I put those in Rav? They're not special or interesting, and they're not, if I put one pair in, that's plenty. But I could have a knitting journal and just, jot down whatever. It doesn't need a picture. So I decided that I will do that. And from here on out, whenever I start a project, I'm going to try at least to put the date and the needle that I'm using and the yarn that I'm using, and just kind of keep a tiny record of whatever notes I may have. We'll see how this goes. I'm not the best at sticking with this kind of thing, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. And I do think this will be more useful as far as keeping kind of a diary of knitting, more useful than Rav, because I won't feel pressured to wait until I have pictures. And I so rarely, I take pictures 4 times a year maybe, and then I because I have access to a really great photographer, but she's only available 4 or 5 times a year, so I tend to save everything up, and then we go and do a photo shoot. And so all of my finished objects on Rav, I think I'm wearing 4 different outfits in total, because that's what I'm wearing on the photo shoot day. So every shawl pattern that I'm modeling that day is the same outfit underneath. So it is what it is, and I think knitting journal will be useful to me because I won't have to wait until I take pictures. And also, a lot of times I don't want to have, especially if I'm working on something without a pattern or with a pattern that I've memorized, I don't want to have my tablet near me when I'm knitting, because chances are, I'll get distracted and I'll put my knitting down and mess around and waste a bunch of time on Facebook or playing stupid games or, Ravelry forums, which are fine. It's fine to do that, but, I would rather kind of minimize my distractions. And if I have the journal, then I don't need to have Ravelry near me. I can just jot down a couple lines in the journal and not risk completely losing the thread of my attention, which I think would be useful. So, knitting journal. And then my question of the week is kind of an intellectual exercise. Someone asked me recently what my favorite yarn was, and I thought, well, that's such a silly question. Like, obviously that must be someone who doesn't know anything about knitting, because why would you even ask that? Every yarn is valuable. Every yarn has its place, but there are some that I go to more than others, and there are some that I will always kind of gravitate to whenever I'm at a yarn store. So whenever I go into Spokane and go to Paradise, I tend to end up in one of two spots. So I guess my top three, if I had to pick, would be obviously Mini Mochi would be one, because I do love using it for color work. I think it adds such an easy way of kind of putting some razzle dazzle into your color work to have that gradient color change, and people who aren't in the know are always very impressed, which, you know, I'm all about, like, soaking up praise. So I'm definitely a big fan of Mini Mochi. So it's a single ply, and it's kind of loosely spun. It's a bit thick and thin in spots, which can be good or it can be bad. There are, on these mittens, there's a couple of spots where I ran into a thinner chunk for a bit, and the black is peeking through some, which is not ideal, but I'm hoping that blocking will fix that, and it won't really be noticeable anymore. I can live with a little bit of thick and thin. It's not a problem. And then other than that, my next two favorites, and again, I'm sticking with fingering weight because that's what I go through the most of. Manisteel Uruguay Allegria, which is a sock yarn. It's I believe it's an 80/20 merino nylon. It's very, very soft, but it also holds up really well, which is remarkable because usually you can have one or the other, but you can't have both. And I have a pair of Allegria socks in their Carnival colorway that I've had for over 2 years, and they've been in heavy rotation for over 2 years. So they've made it through 2.5 Idaho winters, which is pretty impressive. And they still look just as good as the day that I finished them, which is very, very impressive. They, you know, I have socks that I've made since then out of more harder wearing sock yarns that haven't held up as well. So kudos to you. And then for my third favorite yarn, I guess probably I would have to cheat and say Lakes Yarn and Fiber Alturas, which is a yak and merino blend. It's just a beautiful, beautiful yarn. It takes dye really interestingly because the yarn itself is not white. It's like a kind of a dove gray. And so when you dye it, you end up with these colors that should be bright on other fiber or other bases, end up this beautiful heathered kind of muted shades. So I love that stuff, and that's what I use to make my Tartessos shawl by MK Nance, and I look forward to making some more things out of it. Amy of Lakes Yarn and Fiber, who again, you know, lives right down the street from me, was at the Portland Rose City Yarn Crawl this past weekend, and hopefully she did not sell out of Alturas, because when she gets back, that's the first thing I'm going to do is head over to her place and try and raid her supply for some more of it. Also, you know, on that note, if you were at the Rose City Yarn Crawl and you went to Close Knit on Friday, then you probably saw her, and you probably saw many, many, many samples. I think I knit all of the samples that she took. There might have been one or two that she knit or that someone else knit, but I think pretty much all the samples that she had were made by me. So I took a huge bag over to her house on Wednesday and was just like, here, you take these. And, you know, there's a couple shawls, a sock, just a bunch of different stuff. So if you saw those, you know, those were mine. I feel like I have a little bit of, you know, probably misplaced pride, but I was kind of hoping to wear my Glynis shawl today, which is, again, it's my most recent finished object, but that's where it was. And she's not back from Portland yet, so oh well. Hopefully next week I'll be able to wear it because I really love how it came out, and I look forward to talking about that pattern and showing it off. So I think that's pretty much everything for the week. I think I mentioned this before, but it might have been on the first draft of this. I'm going to try and keep these to about 30 minutes. I feel like that's kind of the ideal length for me, 30 or just under. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If you would like to get in touch with me, I am Molly Wally on Ravelry, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's MOLLIEWOLLIE. And I am the blog is at lakecityknitting.blogspot.com, and my email is lakecityknitting@gmail.com. Any of those are perfectly fine ways to contact me. They're kind of equally quick to respond to any of them because they all have the same alerts on my phone. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with me if you have favorite yarns that you want to plug, and yeah, let me hear from you. Thank you.